Welcome back to A Writer's Mind. I'm your host, Shrey Gladden. It has been a while, so clearly I did not keep up with writing over last school year. Kind of a whole bunch of reasons. The licensing classes I was taking, both for my program and through the state, completely took up all my time and was overwhelming, and we were dealing with some family issues and ripping out carpet and all kinds of stuff. So writing just did not happen. Generally, I got one partial chapter written on a plane in February, and it's now July. So clearly a lot of other stuff was going on, and I just couldn't fit writing in. And sometimes that is life. But things are calming down, sort of, and I'm at least not taking as many classes, so I can hopefully get some writing in. And this episode is kind of getting just fully restarted on this project and on writing in general. I've been focusing a lot on getting some other book and writing related things going and organized and started, kind of checking off the really long mental and now like physical to-do list of things that were just really kind of overwhelming my thoughts. And so I couldn't get into a writing mode even when I had a few minutes, because every time I sat down to write, it was like, well, I also need to do this and this and this and that and the other. So trying to get into the headspace of writing when there's so much going on can be really challenging for me particularly. Even though writing generally is a form of stress relief for me, when I hit that point where there's just too many things on the list and too many things bouncing around in my mind, I can't get into a creative mindset. So hopefully that is changing and I'm getting back on track. And part of that, as some of the last few episodes I talked about, I was just really struggling with trying to make all the pieces of this story fit together and work and cement what the goal of the characters and of the story in general, like what was I trying to accomplish with this story? What was the point? And all of the things, they really weren't coming together very well. And we were on a trip sometime at the end of last summer, I think. And I was kind of talking through the struggles that I was having with my fiance, Chris, and because he's really good at diagnosing what the issue is when I can't see it. And I'm just like, this just isn't working and it's frustrating me and I'm just all over. He's really good at helping me kind of pinpoint what exactly it is that's causing all the problem. And so we were talking through the problems I was having with the world and building the world and having it make sense. And then also the problems I was having with the main character and trying to make her backstory make sense and fit in with the world and mesh that up with the rules. And just none of it was coming together like it should have. And as we were talking, Chris kind of pauses for a minute, looks over, and he's like, your main character's story is interesting by itself. Like, you don't really need all of this other paranormal stuff. And so basically, I was writing two separate stories and trying to force them together in a way that was not working at all and was just causing a lot of undue headaches and frustration. So what I have decided to do after spending some time thinking about that, obviously for quite a while, I am actually going to be splitting this project into two different books, because as I was going through and thinking about developing Rissa's character and building her backstory, I realized that was actually, as you pointed out, that was its own story by itself, and it's going to be told better without the different world and the investigation and the karma stuff. I didn't need any of that to tell her story, because her story is complete on its own. And not that I've completely figured out her entire story, but her story makes sense and will be compelling by itself. And adding this layer of the karmic investigator trying to come in and figure it all out wasn't working, because part of the investigation with Beatrix was going to require that she would somehow find out things that she couldn't ever find out, because she couldn't get into Rissa's memories, and there was no other record of what had been going on and what the two girls had been doing. And that was a huge roadblock for me in like trying to figure out the rest of the story. It was like I had the story in my head, but there was no way for Beatrix to actually uncover the story. And rather than continue to beat my head against a wall while trying to figure out how to make that work and pushing things and forcing rules of the story in a way that was making me really dissatisfied with how the story progression was going to go, I'm just splitting it into its own story. So I'll go back to that in a second and how I'm making the changes, because that is the only little bit of writing that I got done over the last almost year, was starting a new version of that part of the story. The other part, what I'm going to be doing is making some changes to just the overall style and feel of Beatrix's side of the story. So I am still going to work on building this world with the karmic link between Earth and Beatrix's world. And without this kind of pre-imagined story of Riss's life, I can focus on just building the world and coming up with the rules on how it works outside of a particular story that I wanted to write. And this is different than how I've done any of my other non-realistic series. I'm not a planner. I don't outline. I don't do world building ahead of time. I usually just let it develop as I go, which, as I've said, often causes problems and I have to go back and fix stuff. But that was not developing with these two stories combined. And so I'm going to spend some time, and I have been, working through the details of the two worlds, how they connect, how they operate together, what I want the rules to be outside of trying to fit them to the other story. So I want to get the rules in place for these two worlds and how they interact before I put a plot into the world. And this is going to be challenging for me because, like I said, I just don't usually work like that. So it's going to be an adventure. We'll see. I at least want to have like the basic structures, like a core set of rules that I'm going to keep consistent throughout, because nobody likes it when rules suddenly change in the middle of a story or a series. And you're like, wait, what does that mean? How does that even work anymore? I thought it was this, that. So I'm going to try to solidify at least some like core rules. Some of those interactions and everything are still going to develop as the story goes, because I just can't completely change the way I write. But I do need to have a better sense of the two worlds and what the point is of them interacting, why they're doing the things that they're doing. And I'll probably get a little bit more into that in the next episode, because I've got some ideas in my head that I'm still kind of piecing together. But I think that if I can do that and have a structure for the world in place, then I can start looking at stories that fit within that structure. And I have a few ideas on that as well. But I think because the book that I was previous writing with everything mushed together, Riss's story was getting pretty dark. And that originally wasn't what I wanted for this book with the karmic elements into it. So as I start splitting them and reworking the karmic side of the story, I want to go back to that lighter tone. So Beatrix's battle with Cal will be still there, still present, but kind of give some opportunity for some lightness to the story, to both of them kind of trying to get at each other throughout these investigations, and using that as a way that I can build that relationship between the two of them without it going into kind of this like darker, nastier feud. It'll still be a feud, but have some elements of playfulness to it to keep the story going, keep readers interested. And then the stories, where how I was writing it, like Riss's story was really taking over everything and was putting this darker tone on it, which so the other story will be a darker story. But sticking with the karmic side of things, I don't want it to be as dark. So some of the stories, I can then think about them throughout the series, that this is going to be, there's going to be some playfulness to it. There's going to be a little bit of like chaos and craziness as she's trying to get through some of these. I'm changing up some of the rules on how she operates, which is going to let her go between different human hosts as she's investigating. So my thoughts are kind of that she's going to get dropped into originally whoever Cal supposedly thinks is going to be the most useful. That's rarely true because he's, just a jerk. And so he'll plop her into somebody that is not very helpful at all. And then she'll have to kind of maneuver her way through people involved in the case to find someone who is actually at the center of whatever is going on with the karmic flow of energy. So a little bit more, I'm not a super funny person, but I'm hoping that I can bring some levity and lightness to the story while she's trying to piece together these overall problems. And I'm looking at it more from a series perspective as well, that these disturbances aren't necessarily like one super horrible human who's causing a problem. Like there is something bigger going on between the two worlds, and individual people are exacerbating that with their actions. But there's a deeper thing that Beatrix is eventually going to recognize and then try to bring attention to and work to correct or fix or make a change or whatever. So I think thinking about it as a series is going to help me develop the world a little bit more and put that structure in place as I figure out, okay, what exactly is the overarching problem? What is Beatrix going to need to do to address it? And what are the complications that are going to come into play with each of the stories in the overall series? So that's helping me kind of just piece things out a little bit more, break it down to make it less overwhelming, and having that freedom to develop this series overarching story outside of individual stories, and particularly the one story with the character Riss that I really wanted to tell that was not at all working with what I needed to do with the karmic worlds. So that I haven't actually started rewriting those portions yet. I'm going to probably be bouncing back and forth between the two. So the episodes will have a little bit of everything, and you'll see how the original story is going to end up being divided. But the writing that I did get done in February, and I just reread today, and I'm still feeling good about it, what I wrote in February. So that's a good sign. I think I'm starting off on a good track. So there will be some changes as far as names. So I'll kind of go through that first. Because once I started looking at this from just the character story, not anything else, the names weren't feeling authentic to the story that I'm now going to tell with these characters. So Riss, I wanted to give her a more traditional name, something that would come from not necessarily like biblical names, but if you're talking about like hyper-conservative, grounded in religious ideology, a lot of those names are going to be less unique, less modern and trendy. So I went with Penelope Elizabeth Carter is going to be Riss's new name in this version. Her little sister, I changed the name to Laurel, and the little brother is going to be Timothy. And I'm trying to think, I don't think I've actually renamed the parents yet. But so I'm working on that. So I got about a little over 1,400 words written on this first chapter. And I think it's just about completed this first chapter. I left off mid-sentence, actually, because I think the plane was landing or something, and it was like, oh, put your laptops away. But I think that was actually a good place to stop because I hadn't quite determined what the next scene was going to be and how I wanted to leave this scene. So it starts similarly to what I had originally with Penelope now, waking up in her bedroom, but rather than this being Beatrix jumping into her body and taking over her soul, basically, not Riss, Penelope is waking up to her mother pounding on her door. So I wanted to jump in right away with showing the home environment. So the first look you get at this family and what they're like is the imbalanced nature of the mom. She's losing it one second, sweet and syrupy the next. So you get a really clear sense that the mom is highly unstable, dealing with some mental health issues that are not at all being addressed, and that this is setting the tone for how the family operates. Also brought in right away just the power battle that exists between Penelope and her mom. So even though on some levels she knows how to deal with her parents, she knows which battles to pick, she's still a teenager, and sometimes even though you know you shouldn't react to something, just can't stop yourself. And so we see that at the beginning of this chapter. that in her head, she's trying to talk herself down. But as the mom continues to pound on the door and scream at her, she finally yells back, like, I'm awake. And then you see the mom like back off and like, oh, okay, breakfast is almost ready. And she disappears. And so we know that these battles exist, that as much as Penelope wants to play her parents and get through everything smoothly, sometimes she just can't. It's just too much for her. And then we meet the other two siblings, and we have a similar interaction with the dad when he comes to breakfast and immediately starts grilling them on their academics performance. Why is this missing? How come your grade is here? Why are you behind? And he's physically very calm and distant. He doesn't raise his voice, but I make it clear that the younger kids are pretty terrified, particularly Timothy. Like, he's only 9. He still is very influenced by his parents' emotional status. And the little sister, Laurel, is at a stage of pretending not to care, not wanting to meet any of their expectations, since meeting expectations is impossible. But I give those hints and indications that even though she plays like, whatever, didn't feel like doing it, I don't have to do work, whatever, you already take everything else away, like there's nothing left for you to punish me with. Like, she still has her hands clenched under the table, that it is affecting her, but she is doing her absolute darndest at this age to pretend it doesn't. And that's her reaction strategy right now. And so you get the sense, seeing all of this through Penelope's eyes, that she wants to protect her siblings, but she doesn't know how. Like, she is doing what she can to get herself through this. She is counting down the weeks to graduation till she can escape. And that's all she can do at this moment. So I tried in this first scene to really set up the tone of the family, some impending conflict, and just making the reader aware that things are not on a good path and we're heading towards some sort of catastrophe or explosion. You just don't know what it is yet. So a lot of what I had already written in the original version is still where I'm planning to go with the story. So the issues of Penelope's sexuality are going to come into play, but that's going to be more heavily related back to the parents' religious beliefs and the struggle between individuality and self-expression in a household that does not value or approve of who you are as a person. So that, rather than being something that Beatrix finds out and adds to the mystery and all of that, it's going to be a more present battle within Penelope, so internal conflict, and then it's going to spill out into her other interactions with their pastor and with the parents as well. So that the parents' history is going to be a main focus of telling this story and in what's driving all of the characters. So taking out that supernatural aspect, it did kind of leave me as I was thinking about, okay, what are the next couple of scenes? What do I need to prepare for as I'm writing through these? I had written in the previous version, Beatrix uncovering clues about who, then Rhys was and what her life was like. And so even though a lot of the events in this early part of the story are going to be similar, it kind of hit me that it's like, oh, well, I'm not uncovering a mystery now at this point. So now I need to figure out how to tell those parts of the story there is no missing classmate yet. There is no suspicion of anything because nothing has happened. So the school environment is going to need to be different. And the focus is on not only those internal conflicts that I already talked about, but what Beatrix was trying to uncover. What were the girls doing that got them into this situation and all of that? That's actually going to come into play much earlier in the story now, because we're going to be seeing the events that are going to lead up to the climax and Arya and all of that. So it's kind of flip-flopping some of what I had planned in the original version, because now we're going to see it play out and then see the consequences rather than starting at the point of consequence and then trying to unravel what led to it. So it's really kind of reversing the story And some characters I think I'm still going to keep in, but obviously some of the characters that we had met already may not really have a place in this version of the story, so they might disappear at some point. We'll see. It'll be interesting trying to restructure this portion of the story into a linear timeline when before it had been a very non-linear and kind of here's a piece, there's a piece. We'll see how they all fit together at the end. So it'll be a fun adventure. I've never done a major rewrite like this that completely moved story pieces around in this way. So it'll probably be kind of fun. I'm looking forward to it. And I think that this just feels like a much better way to tell this character story and to allow the reader to connect with this story and really be able to experience the same emotional and mental challenges that are being thrown at Penelope. Because I think that was part of what was bugging me with the original version was that I had this character who was really dealing with some traumatic events in her life, and we were seeing it only through the film of Beatrix's interpretation and attempt to solve a mystery. And I think that wasn't quite doing justice to the story. So I'm looking forward to this rewrite. It's probably going to take forever, but I think this is the right way to go. And I'll probably be working a little bit more on that initially, since I do have a lot of the story elements worked out in my mind, and I'm still putting together ideas for the world and what's happening in the karmic side of this story. So we might see a little bit less of that in the next few episodes as I'm kind of getting started on piecing all of this back together. I may be talking through like ideas and story notes on the karmic side of things before I really get back into the actual writing of chapters. So we'll see how that goes. This will be interesting seeing how both of these stories pan out. It is a little bit painful to basically be scrapping whatever I was at, like 27,000 words on the original version of this, which was more than I've written on anything in quite a few years. So it's a little bit hard to just set that aside and just realize, like, well, that's not going anywhere, and restarting on both. But that's what needs to happen, I think, to make both of these stories better than what I had initially. And I am looking forward to seeing where these go. So this is a little shorter episode since I didn't have much writing, but just kind of see where things are and what I plan on doing moving forward. So thank you for those of you who have hung in here with me trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing as I jump back into writing and trying to get some creative thoughts and mojo going. It's been a long time and I'm still trying to, figure out where I'm at as far as writing, what my writing style is now, where my writing interests are, and what I want to do moving forward. I know I want to write and have that be part of my life again. It's just figuring out how and when and what. That takes a little time. It's a process and I'm working through it. But thank you for those who are listening. Hopefully this is helpful and gets you to start getting into some creative writing and headspace as well. Thanks so much, guys. I'll be back soon. And for information on any of my other books and what else I've got going on as far as writing in the publishing world, you can find me online at delsheriegladden.com. And the theme music for this podcast is by Mon Plaisir.